Good day, welcome to another React class. In this video, we will be learning about conditional statements and also loop. You will often want to display multiple similar components from a collection of data. You can use the JavaScript array method to manipulate an array of data. In our lesson today, you will be using filter and map with React to filter and transform your array of data into an array of components. You will learn how to render components from an array using JavaScript map, how to render only specific components using JavaScript filter, when and why to use React keys. You will learn how to return JSX depending on a condition and how to conditionally include or exclude a piece of JSX, rendering data from array. Like what we have now in the system where we have products of components like this, we need to be able to use array to store all the data we have. The only difference among those list items is their content. You will often need to show several instances of the same component using different data when building interfaces, from list of comments to gallery or profile images, like in this case, products. In this situation, you can store the data in JavaScript object and array and use methods like map and filter to render list of components from them. We've gone ahead to generate or to create 4 different records, and the data can be different based on your own use case. Now that we've moved the data into an array, we can actually safely delete this and comment this out so that we can see how we want to implement that. The next thing is to bring in our data object so that we can manipulate it. We can use that to build our component. This method is now using the map method. We need to map the product member into a new array of JSX node called list item, and that will be done outside of the return. Here, we can call it list product. So the next thing we have, it's supposed to be our JSX element. We put that there, and we have this. Then we can display our list products here, and then we have this. Obviously, what we've been able to achieve here is the loop only. We've not been able to add the content inside, and that's because we've not changed the static content that we have here. Let's go ahead and inspect what we have inside this object that we have here, and then we can change that to mimic what it is we want to have based on what we have in the data. Then finally we can have our color. So when you use an arrow functions like this, you don't need to write return immediately if you use this bracket. But if you use the curly braces like this, the curly bracket like this, you then need to specify a return. This is still a valid JavaScript, but it doesn't do anything here. You can see our result is blank because we then need to use return to capture what we have. So you should take note when using map function. If you want to return an expression, you have to use bracket like this and remove the curly braces like so. Next thing I want to talk about is going to see how React handles error. How do you know what's happening under the hood? There are some times whereby you will not see anything on the screen because you've messed up one or two things. So you can check out what's going on when you do inspect elements. And currently there's error going on underneath the screen, but we've not been enabling the error to show to you guys. So now I just toggle this, and then even though this app is running smoothly, you can see the error that is visible here. And one of the errors says that each child in a list should have a unique key. And that is for several reasons. Because you are creating a list like this, React needs to know how to handle this list in itself. So what that means is that you need to supply a key to the item that is being rendered here so that React can know how to handle what is going on inside. So here where we have products like this, and then we've been able to supply something of some form of ID, this ID will be a good key to make it uniquely identify the list. And this is so that React can be able to update the item easily when anything changes. So there are rules in naming keys. Keys must be unique among siblings. However, it's okay to use the same key for JSX nodes in different array. Keys must not change. That will defeat their purpose. Don't generate them while rendering. They should just come from the data. So how do we update the key? If you come here now, you will see that we are getting an error saying that each child in a list should have a unique key. And to eliminate that error, we need to pass key as a props to product, such that we can have something like this. And when you run that, that error should go away. Filtering array of items. Now imagine that you have this data coming from the database and you want to be able to render 3 stars ratings separate from the rest of the ratings. So you want to change the interface based on the parameter on the data. So how do you do that? So we can go ahead and use filter to achieve that. I'm going to make sure that we're going to have 2 views here. So what I want to do right now is to say 4 stars products. I will then do less than 3 stars products. So I want to do something like this, whereby you can have 4 stars and above, then 3 stars below. Obviously, we are repeating the same thing in terms of the data rendering, but now we're about to change the data. So I can come here and do something new. And what is it I want to do new? Is to filter the content. I want to use filter to filter the content to make sure that I'm watching the stars. Once the stars hit what I want it to be, I want to use that to filter out what I want. So what's the syntax for that? I can come here and rebuild my data. But this time around, I will say this should be a filtered data from the original data. Then I'll use the filter keyword. And what am I doing inside? I want to make sure that I'm dealing with the item. I can use the item. So what am I checking? What am I using to filter? I want to say when item dot, and the filter has to be true, dot, and focus on rating the value when it is less than 3. Anything less than 3 should be what we want. So that's our filter, guys. So item rating is less than 3. Whatever those falls under, it will fit inside this data. So everything less than 3 is actually captured here. And once I'm done with this, how do I then, that then becomes my new data. I then need to run this again, but instead of it running it over data, I will run it over filtered data. So I'm just going to duplicate this code, but this time around, I'm putting my filtered data here. Then this is going to be my list product 2. Or I could call it something else, something more fancy. But that's fine. Then I can come here and come to my filtered product. Let's call it filtered product. Then my results should show filtered products. And can you guys see my results? So my filtered product is showing here my, well, on not so filtered products. So I need to filter this to make sure that I'm only looking at something that is more than 4. So that's what I want to target here. So let's go ahead and pre-filter this one so that it will give us something more than 4, and the other one will always give us something less than 4. So let's see what we need to do. So what we are running here, before we do this, we need to run filter on it. What I'm running now is, I'll say default data. This time around, I'm making sure that it's more than 3. Then I'm looping through over the default data to have this result. So you can see that everything that is more than 4 is showing up here, then everything less is showing up in this section. So let's go ahead and play with data. So to show you how reactive these things can get. If you do 1.5, then this one gets 4.1, You can see that as your data changes, your UI also adjusts to what it is you are filtering on. And that's how you can use filter and map at the same time. So guys, let's talk about conditional rendering. Your component will often need to display different things depending on different conditions. In React, you can conditionally render JSX using JavaScript syntax like if statement and the ternary operator. So to put that to perspective, let's create a new component and call that component favorite. And what that should just do is just to return icon, heart, field, and we can do color red. We can make it size 24 and we should just be good. And it has selected as props, which you can use to determine if the item is a user's favorite. So we can actually render that in front of our ratings. So I can put my ratings here in a kind of a column. So that I have this like this. I can have my ratings sitting here and I can have my favorite sitting like that. So I can have something like this love sign, coming up here, nice and cool. What I want to be able to do is I want to be able to specify that it's selected by passing a value from the data that we have, and it's called favorite. So that data coming from the utility section contains a favorite property, which the system can determine if that item is your favorite or not. So, but we've not implemented this in the code base here to determine if this can be favorite or not. So one of the way to make a conditional statement is by either specifying that it should return this based on a particular value. So what I want to do now is to say that based on the fact that it's selected, return a particular style. So we could do something like this and say if selected, because selected is Boolean. So if it is true, return fill. However, if it is not true, return not fill. So we'll have this result here. And what this is saying is that when it is selected, which is true, it will execute this and terminate here. It won't execute the other part again. This is just like if else. But you don't need to write the else part of it because the else will run anyway if this part does not work, or rather the other part of the line of code will execute if this section does not execute. And whenever a function sees returns, it terminates the function call. Okay, so that's the first form of conditional statement. When you don't want to return anything at all, you can see in this my example, I return empty heart. When it's not, it might be good for the interface, but there might be some scenario whereby you don't want anything to return at all. In that case, you can do away with the return statement and you have something like this, or you could just return null. That's another example. You could return null and you still have the same result, or you could return an empty React element and you still have something like this. So this is another use case if you don't want to return anything at all. What we want to look at now is using conditional statement within JSX, right? How do you use conditional statements? What we just did now is outside JSX. How do you put it inside of JSX? Let's go ahead and figure that out. To use that, you need to know what they call ternary operator. Ternary operator will allow you to do that. So to explain that further for you, I will introduce our normal conditional statements, which is this, and allow you to do if and else. You guys should know this by now. Then, where does our ternary condition come to light? It's in this form. It's like a shortcut for your if condition, where you have your condition here and you have when this condition is true, it executes this. It executes true here. Then if it is not, execute this. So what you're seeing, to write this more shorter for you to see, is to remove the execute if and turn this to false. So what it's saying in literal sense is that if this condition happens to be true, you put a question mark and then it's like asking a question. Is this here? Is it true? If that's the case, it runs what is here. If it is false, it runs after the column. This is a shorthand for this. So this shorthand is what you are going to be expressing in your JSX. So we can run an example inside. You can even run it inside here or outside here. So we'll do two examples. So the first one is to print out, just say true or false. That's what we want to print out here. Nothing too fancy. So how do you start running your JSX is by putting that curly bracket there. Then you follow by your condition. Your condition is selected. And what that condition is saying is that, is this true? If it's true, what's the next line of thing to do is to put the question mark and to run what should show in the true part. Because I want to run this part, I will just say cool. That's what I want to write in the screen, just for you to see it visually. And if it's false, what should happen? I'm going to run not cool there. So this is just for you to see visually and see what's going on. So if we try it out, you can see the results. So when it is the false section, you can see not cool. When it's true, you can see cool part there. So let's bring this to perspective and let it make sense. Let's translate this to actual code that will make sense. Let's go and put it inside the color part. And what we want to do, even though we're running fill for the whole thing, what I want to do here is I want to make sure that when what I have that is selected is true, I want to be able to pass in red, and when it's not, I want to be able to do gray. So that if I run this, I can then see something that is more interesting. So this is more interesting to look at, guys. So another common shortcut you will encounter in JavaScript, inside React component is often comes when you want to render some JSX when the condition is true or render nothing otherwise. What that means is you don't want to have alternative. You want to do this shortcut the way it is. It's nice. You just want to have one way. Only when it is true, that's when it should say something. So let's go ahead and implement that outside here so that you can see the results. So you want to bring your selected, and you're just concerned about whenever it is true, you want to do some form of action. So instead of doing this, you want to do something else. You don't want to have true or false. You just want to do one action. So if it's one action you want to do, you then use and, meaning if this is okay, you want to go ahead and say that's great, that's cool. This is what you want to be able to achieve. That way you don't need to say you don't need to do this, even though it can be achieved by doing this. This is also the same result, but you could see that the first one that we did gave us a more shorter code and, well, maybe better to read. So when is this and then show this, this one gives you a different approach to what it is you're looking at. I use this to render components, not just only string like this. It can render a whole component by itself. So for example, when we have this selected, you could render, let me say a div and say hi, and that could be a component by itself, by the way, which you can render there. Even with this one, you can also render this component and say component A can be sitting right there, and you do this section can then be component B, and everybody is okay with it. So this way you can run your conditional statement within your tag, and whatever you have here, obviously you can run it anywhere within your code. So I can even run my conditional, as we said. Now I can check if there's favorite before even coming to favorite to run all these reports. You can include your conditional statements within here and you'll be fine. Okay, I got an assignment for you guys. It's pretty simple, very simple. I need you to create a list, UL and LI list. Very simple. and you should be able to pass in data. The list of the items should be coming from data source like this. And once the item is coming in, you should be able to have a column that will say delete or not delete. And once that item comes in here, once it's delete, it should strike through the first item, or it should strike through any of the item that has delete property attached to it. That is your assignment for this lesson. Thank you for staying till the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on bell notification in order to be notified when we release new videos. See you in the next one.